Well, hey, Wayside family, my name is Cameron. I'm so excited today to jump into our week of devotions talking about Jesus' entry into Jerusalem in Matthew 21. You know, we call this moment the triumphant entry because of all of the regal and kingly imagery that's happening in the passage, but actually I think it would be better if we called it the anticlimactic entry. Because you see, we have this long-awaited moment when Jesus, the Messiah, God in flesh, enters the holy city to be with his people, and yet nothing happens. Right, so commentators think that the crowd that welcomed Jesus into the city were actually poor peasants that followed him in from Galilee, and yet when he enters into Jerusalem where the leadership and the intellectuals and the wealthy lived, they wanted nothing to do with him. What they should have done was bow down and worship him and call him king, and yet they rejected him. Right, and in a few days they'd be calling for his crucifixion, which is tragic because at this moment in the first century, the air was electric with expectations of the Messiah, God's chosen one to make right what was wrong in the world. But they expected him to come as a military commander who would kick out the Romans using violence and force. But instead, Jesus enters into the city on a donkey, and he begins to sit down and teach the people about loving their enemies. He wasn't the Messiah that they wanted, so they rejected him and killed him. So the encouragement that I want to leave you with today is don't reject the king that rides on a donkey. The humility and meekness of God is actually one of the things that repels people away from him. They reject him because he very often refuses to use his power how we think that he should. We want him to ride in on a stallion and to fix all of our problems, and yet often he doesn't. So perhaps you're feeling frustration in this moment because you or somebody that you know has contracted COVID-19, or due to everything else that's going on, they've lost a job and you're feeling anxious. And with that anxiety comes frustration with God, wondering, God, where are you? Why haven't you fixed this? And honestly, though it may not feel like it, what's most wrong in the world isn't COVID-19. It's not any sickness or cancer or greedy politicians or hunger or suicide. What's most wrong in the world is sin. Sin is the underlying problem. It's the deeper disease. It's what's underneath all of the pain and the frustration and the hurt in the world. And God dealt with sin by himself becoming a human being. And he came not to exercise his power, but to lay it down, not to punish the wicked, but to die for them. So the true king's stallion is a donkey, his crown thorns, his throne a cross, and he conquered sin by losing. He beat death by dying and then not staying dead. So the scandal of the gospel is that our problem is so deep that it requires God to trade his life for our own. And yet the beauty is that he did. So we may not know why God allows painful circumstances to come into our lives, but we know that he enters into them with us. That's why Jesus rode into the city that day on a donkey to enter into our pain and our frustration and our hurt. He doesn't let us go through those things alone. And he did that willingly. And what he asks is for us to trust him. Trust him because in Jesus, God is doing something new and beautiful, and it's for his glory and for our good. I hope this is encouraging to you, friends. Blessings and happy Easter.